The year was 2387. Space was not empty anymore. Humanity had learned that the hard way, not through a friendly radio signal, not through a blinking light in the sky, not through some peaceful first contact movie moment.
No.
Humanity learned it through fire, through the burning of 3 colony ships near the Kepler belt, through the silence that followed when 600 human voices stopped transmitting in the middle of the night. Nobody declared war. Nobody sent a warning. The aliens just came. And they took. They called themselves the Vreth, a civilization so old that their earliest recorded history predated Earth's first single-celled organism. They were tall, nearly 9 feet, with pale silver skin that looked like cracked ice for arms, 2 sets of eyes stacked vertically on a narrow face, and a voice that hummed like a machine rather than spoke like a living creature. They did not consider humans a threat. They did not consider humans much of anything. To the Vreth, humanity was a footnote, a minor species that had crawled out of one unremarkable planet, built some crude metal ships, and started wandering into space like a child stumbling into a highway. They had been watching Earth for 200 years. They had never once been impressed. Supreme Commander Zethural sat in the command chair of the Vreth flagship Eternal Dominion, a vessel 4 kilometers long, shaped like a curved blade, its hull made of living crystal that repaired itself as fast as weapons could damage it. Around him, 40 junior officers moved quietly at their stations. The bridge smelled of cold ozone and the faint chemical scent that all Vreth ships carried, something between burnt copper and old stone. Zethural was reviewing patrol reports when his scanner officer, a young Vreth named Kirill, turned from his station with a slightly confused look on his narrow face. "Commander," Kirill said, "I am detecting an unscheduled vessel in grid 79. Zethural did not look up from his report. "Vreth vessel?" "No, sir." "Merchant ship? Explorer class?"
Kirill hesitated.
"It is human, sir." That made Zethural look up. He set down his report slowly. He tilted his head the way Vreth did when something mildly amused them, a slight lean to the left, the lower set of eyes narrowing. "A human ship. In grid 79. He almost smiled. "That is deep in our patrol zone. What class?" Kirill checked his screen again, then checked it once more. He frowned, a deeper frown this time, one that did not belong on a routine patrol report. "Sir," he said carefully, "I am having difficulty with the classification." "Then scan it," Zethural said simply, waving one hand. "Run a full deep spectrum scan. Find out what garbage heap they welded together, and log it, so we can send them back to their little dirt planet." Kirill nodded. He turned to his station. He powered up the deep spectrum scanner, the most advanced sensor technology the Vreth had ever built, capable of reading the molecular composition of a vessel from 300,000 kilometers away, capable of counting individual bolts inside a ship's hull, capable of mapping power cores down to their last electron. He aimed it at the human ship. He pressed the scan button. For exactly 4 seconds, nothing happened. Then every alarm on the bridge went off at once. The sound was deafening. Red emergency light flooded the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. Officers spun in their chairs. Screens flickered. 2 junior officers knocked their data tablets off their stations reaching for controls. For a moment, just one raw, ugly moment, the most advanced warship in the Vreth fleet looked like pure chaos. "Silence the alarms," Zethural snapped, standing from his chair. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. The alarms died. The red light faded back to normal. But the data on Kirill's screen did not change.
It sat there,
waiting, demanding to be read.
Kirill stared at it. He did not speak.
"Report," Zethural said, walking toward the scanner station. Kirill turned to face his commander. His silver skin had gone slightly pale, paler than usual, paler than Zethural had ever seen on a junior officer. "Sir," Kirill said quietly. The scan completed, and Kirill looked back at the screen. He read the numbers once more. He had already read them 4 times. They had not changed. They were not going to change. "The vessel," Kirill began, "designates as a human military classification. Registry marks identify it as the UES Harbinger, United Earth ship, commissioned 12 years ago. He paused. It is 3.2 kilometers in length. Zethural's eyes narrowed. The Eternal Dominion was 4 kilometers. A 3-kilometer human ship was already unusual. Their largest known vessel before this had been barely 1 kilometer. But size alone had not triggered the alarms. Weapons? The commander asked. Kirill read. 42 primary rail cannons, each one capable of firing a tungsten slug at .4 light speed.
He stopped.
Swallowed. Commander, each slug carries approximately the energy of a small nuclear detonation on impact. The bridge was very quiet now. Continue, Zethural said. 16 missile bays. Human records call the missile type Wraith class. Our database has no entry for Wraith class. Kirill pulled up a secondary screen. I accessed intercepted human military communications from 3 years ago. There is one reference. A human admiral said, and I am quoting directly. The Wraith doesn't just destroy a ship. It erases the coordinates where the ship used to be. Nobody moved. Shields? Zethural asked. His voice was still calm. He was trained for this. He was a supreme commander. He did not panic. Kirill read the energy signature data. He read it twice. He looked at Zethural. Sir, he said. The shield output, it is not in our measurement scale. Recalibrate. I did, sir. 3 times. Kirill turned the screen so Zethural could see it directly. The shield they are running, it is not defensive technology. It is, our scan actually hit the shield and partially reflected back. The energy the shield absorbed from our own deep spectrum scan was enough to power this flagship for 11 days. The silence on the bridge became something else now. It became the kind of silence that has weight, the kind that presses down on your chest. Zethural looked at the screen for a long time. He looked at the numbers. He looked at the energy readings. He looked at the weapons count. He looked at the hull composition data, a layered alloy that the scanner did not recognize, backed by something the Vreth database simply labeled unknown composite, possible self-repairing structure. How many crew? He asked finally.
Kirill checked.
412. Zethural blinked. For a ship that size, with that firepower, with that shield output, 412 crew was almost insultingly small. The Eternal Dominion ran with 6,000. 400, the commander repeated quietly. Yes, sir. Zethural stood very still for a moment. Then he turned and walked back to his command chair. He sat down. He folded 2 of his hands in his lap. He looked at the main screen where the UES Harbinger drifted in the dark of Grid 79, calm, quiet, running with all lights off, like a predator that had no reason to hide because nothing had ever successfully hunted it. He thought about the 600 humans who had died near the Kepler belt. He thought about the 3 colony ships. He thought about 200 years of watching Earth and never once being impressed. He looked at his weapons officer. Do not arm anything, he said. Sir? I said, do not arm anything. His voice was very quiet now. Open a communication channel. Hailing frequency. Standard interspecies protocol. He straightened in his chair. HFY, always speak to them first. The communication channel opened. Static. A low hum. The digital handshake between 2 species technology. Clumsy, slow, like 2 strangers reaching for the same door handle in the dark. Then a voice. It was a human voice. Female. Completely calm. The kind of calm that does not come from peace. It comes from absolute certainty. The kind of calm a mountain has. This is Captain Sarah Reeves of the United Earth ship Harbinger. You've entered a restricted corridor, Vreth vessel. Please identify yourself and state your purpose. Zethural stared at the speaker. A restricted corridor. She had called Grid 79, deep inside Vreth patrol space. A restricted corridor. As if it were human territory. As if the Vreth flagship were the trespasser. He composed himself. He leaned forward. His translator device hummed against his throat. This is Supreme Commander Zethural of the Vreth Eternal Dominion, he said. You are the ones who have entered our patrol grid, Captain. Please explain your presence and power down your weapon systems. A pause. With respect, Commander. Our weapon systems are not currently active. Kirill turned from his station and mouthed the words silently to Zethural. Not active. The weapon signatures on the scan. The rail cannons. The Wraith missiles. All of that, and they were not even turned on. We are here, Captain Reeves continued, because 3 months ago, a Vreth patrol vessel destroyed a human science station in this grid. 14 researchers. Most of them were students. The youngest was 19 years old. A pause. Not an emotional pause. A deliberate one. We are here to make sure it does not happen again. Zethural was quiet for a moment. The science station. He remembered the report. A minor incident. Unauthorized human structure inside a contested zone. Standard removal protocol. The Vreth patrol had done exactly what it was supposed to do. That structure was in contested space, he said. Our patrol acted within Vreth law. Your law, she said, and her voice did not rise, not even slightly, does not apply to human citizens. It never did. We just didn't have the right conversation yet. Another pause. I'd like to have it now. Zethural looked around his bridge. His officers were watching him. Every single one of them was watching him with that particular stillness that meant they were scared and doing their best not to show it. He made a decision. Very well, Captain. We will talk. They met in a neutral shuttle bay, a midpoint vessel, a small diplomatic craft that the Vreth provided, floating in the dead space between the two ships. Protocol required neutral ground. Protocol also said both parties would bring no more than 3 representatives. Zethural brought himself, his chief diplomat Soral, and his head of military intelligence, a cold-eyed officer named Vreth, who had spent 20 years studying human behavior and still found them deeply confusing. Captain Sarah Reeves walked in with 2 people. The first was a tall man, lean, dark-haired, with the kind of quiet eyes that had seen things they did not talk about. He was introduced simply as Major Daniel Cross. No title elaboration. No rank explanation beyond those 2 words. Vreth noted that Cross had no visible weapons. He also noted the way Cross moved, like every room he entered was one he had already planned 3 exits from. The second person was smaller, younger. A woman barely past 30, with red hair pulled back tightly and a tablet under her arm. Dr. Mira Okafor, ship's chief science and tactical analyst. The 3 humans sat across the small table from the 3 Vreth. Captain Reeves looked at Zethural directly. She did not look at the size difference between them. She did not look at the 4 arms. She did not blink at the double eyes. She just looked at him, the way you look at someone whose next sentence matters. You scanned us, she said. Not an accusation. A fact. Standard procedure, Zethural said. Good, she said. I hoped you would. She nodded to Dr. Okafor. Okafor opened her tablet and slid it across the table. On the screen was the Harbinger's full weapons specification, not the partial readout the Vreth scanner had pulled. The complete list. Every system. Every capability. Every yield rating. Zethural stared at it. Soral leaned in to read. Vreth did not move. He was watching the humans' faces, not the screen. The numbers on that tablet were worse than the scan. Why are you showing us this? Zethural asked carefully. Because, Captain Reeves said, folding her hands on the table, the Vreth have spent 200 years watching humanity and deciding we are not worth respecting. And in that time, we lost colony ships. We lost a science station. We lost students. Her voice did not waver. I am not here to threaten you, Commander. I am here so that you understand something very clearly before anyone makes another mistake. And what is that? She looked at him. We are not what we were, she said. Caro, look at those numbers. Really look at them. And understand that the Harbinger is not our most powerful ship. The shuttle bay was very silent. Then what is? Soral asked quietly. Captain Reeves smiled. It was a small smile. Patient. Almost kind. That, she said, depends on whether we have a problem today or not. Vreth had spent 20 years studying humans. He knew their culture. He knew their music, loud, chaotic, emotional. He knew their food, absurdly varied, heavily seasoned, made with an almost irrational amount of passion. He knew their history, A brutal, messy, complicated record of wars and disasters and miraculous recoveries that should not have been possible. That last part had always bothered him. He had flagged it twice in official reports to the Vreth High Council, a two-sentence note at the bottom of long intelligence summaries. Humans demonstrate pattern of recovery that defies standard civilizational modeling. Recommend closer study. The High Council had not responded to either flag. Now, sitting across from Major Daniel Cross in a diplomatic shuttle between the most powerful warship the Vreth had ever built and a human vessel that outgunned it on paper, Vreth finally understood his own unease. While the commander and the captain talked, Vreth spoke quietly to Cross. "How long," he asked, "did it take you to build the Harbinger?" Cross looked at him. "For years." Vreth blinked all four eyes. The Eternal Dominion had taken 31 years to construct. "For years," he repeated. "We had motivation," Cross said simply. "The colony ships," Vreth said. Cross nodded. Vreth was quiet for a moment. Then, "Our intelligence suggested humanity was still 20 years from developing rail cannon technology." Cross looked at him again. There was something in his expression that was not anger and not pride. It was something quieter and more complicated than either of those things. "We were," Cross said, "until you gave us a reason to hurry." He paused. "You want to know the real thing about humans, Vreth? We are not fast learners in peace. Peace makes us slow. We get comfortable. We argue about small things. We build parks and write songs and argue about what to eat for dinner." He leaned forward slightly. "But the moment something threatens the people we love, we stop sleeping. We stop arguing. We stop being comfortable. Every engineer, every physicist, every soldier, we all point in the same direction. And we don't stop." Vreth absorbed this. "The Wraith missiles," he said. "Those were not in any database." "No," Cross said. "They weren't. Did you develop them after the Kepler Belt incident?" "We developed them," Cross said, "in the 14 months after we lost those colony ships. 300 engineers. No days off. Some of them didn't see their families for a year." His voice was completely flat when he said this, not for dramatic effect, just because it was a plain fact. The youngest one on the team was 22 years old, fresh out of university. She designed the detonation sequencer in a week because she had a sister on one of those colony ships. The shuttle bay hummed softly around them. "Caro," Vreth said. The word was strange in his mouth, borrowed from the human translator's vocabulary notes. "This pattern. The acceleration under threat. Is this documented in your history?" Cross almost smiled. "Every 100 years or so," he said. "Different threat each time. Same result." Vreth thought about his unflagged reports. He thought about the High Council. He thought about 200 years of watching Earth and filing it under minor species. No threat assessment required. He thought about a 22-year-old human who hadn't slept properly in a year and designed a weapon that erased coordinates. He made a note in his internal log that he was going to need significantly more paper for his next report. Back at the main table, the real conversation had arrived. It had not announced itself. It had crept in slowly, the way the hardest conversations always do, disguised as logistics, dressed up as protocol, hiding inside diplomatic language until it could not hide anymore. "The Kepler Belt incident," Seth said finally. Carefully. Captain Reeves had been waiting for this. She had been patient. She had laid out the Harbinger's capabilities. She had let the numbers breathe. She had not rushed. But now she looked at the Vreth commander with something in her eyes that was not anger. It was grief, and grief was somehow harder to negotiate with. 612 people, she said. "I have their names. Every one of them. I have a list on my ship." She paused. "Their families asked me to make sure the people responsible understood that they had names. Not just a number in an incident report." Zethiel was quiet. He had not expected this. In Vreth diplomacy, casualties were statistics. They were logged, calculated, offset against strategic value. This was not cruelty. It was simply how the Vreth processed war.
Clean.
Mathematical. "Captain," Soral began. "Marcus Webb," Reeves said. Her voice was quiet and clear. He was 43. He was a cargo engineer. He'd been on the same shipping route for 11 years. He had 2 daughters. The older one was getting married the month after he died. She looked at Zethiel. Emily Frost. She was 26. She was supposed to be on a 3-month contract and then going back to finish her teaching degree.
She paused.
Thomas Park. 61. He'd been in space since he was 19. He called his mother every single Sunday for 40 years. She waited by the phone for 6 weeks after the ship stopped transmitting before anyone told her. The table was silent. Zethiel's lower set of eyes had closed slightly, the Vreth equivalent of being hit by something you did not see coming. I am not telling you these names, Reeves said, to make you feel guilt. I'm telling you because I need you to understand the scale of what casual dismissal costs. You called it a minor incident. For us, it was 612 separate catastrophes. 612 families. She leaned forward just slightly. The reason the Harbinger exists, the reason you are sitting here looking at specifications that scared your scanner, is because of those names. Every single advancement, every system on my ship, it was paid for with the grief of the people those names left behind. Zethiel looked at her for a long time. He thought about the 200 years. He thought about minor species. He thought about the patrol report that had described the destruction of the science station in 40 words. He thought about a 19-year-old student who had been in the wrong grid on the wrong day. HFY, he said. The translator rendered the phrase into Vreth as something close to from this point forward. I acknowledge the weight of this. What do you want from this meeting, Captain? She looked at him. I want a line, she said simply. A clear line. A boundary both our peoples understand and both our peoples respect. No more colony ships. No more science stations. No more students. Her voice was steady. And if that line is ever crossed again by either side, consequences that are immediate, specific, and known in advance. Zethiel was quiet. You are asking for a treaty. I am asking for acknowledgement, she said. A treaty is paperwork. Acknowledgement is something you feel. She looked at him. Do you feel it, Commander? He did not answer immediately. He turned the question over in his mind. He thought about the scan data. He thought about the 22-year-old with the Wraith missile. He thought about Thomas Park's mother waiting by the phone.
Yes, he said.
Quietly. Truthfully. Good, she said. Then we can write the paperwork. It could have ended there. It should have ended there. But war never ends cleanly. It leaves things behind, like splinters under skin that you don't notice until you press on them wrong. 3 hours into the diplomatic session, Dr. Okafor's tablet chirped. She looked at it. Her expression did not change, but her posture stiffened slightly, the kind of stiffening that happens when you read something and your brain needs a second to process whether it is bad or very bad. She leaned over to Captain Reeves and spoke quietly. Reeves listened. She did not react. Not visibly. Excuse us one moment, she said to Zethiel. The 3 humans stepped to the far side of the shuttle bay. Zethiel watched them. Their voices were low. Cross said something short. Okafor showed him the tablet. Reeves nodded once, the kind of nod that closes a decision. They came back to the table. There is something you need to know, Reeves said. She looked at Zethiel directly. 30 minutes ago, our ship's internal sensors detected a Vreth tracking device. It was attached to the outside hull of this diplomatic shuttle. It was placed there before we boarded. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Zethiel turned to Soral. Soral's face was carefully neutral. Too carefully neutral. Vethran, sitting at the end of the table, had gone very still. Commander, Reeves said, and her voice had changed. Not to anger. To something colder. More precise. The way a tool becomes precise when you hold it correctly. I want to believe this meeting is genuine. I want to believe that you came here to talk in good faith. But if that device was placed there on your orders, or on the orders of someone in your chain of command, then everything we discussed in the last 3 hours is built on sand.
She paused.
So, I'm going to ask you once. Directly. Did you authorize a tracking device on the shuttle? Every eye in the room was on Zethiel. He looked at Soral. Soral looked back at him. And in that look, in the 3 seconds of that look, Zethiel understood exactly what had happened. He turned back to Reeves.
No, he said.
I did not.
He stood.
He turned to Soral. He spoke in Vreth, low, direct, without diplomatic softening. Did you authorize this? Soral was quiet for exactly 1 second too long. It was standard intelligence protocol, Soral said. A precaution. Remove it, Zethiel said.
Now.
And you will answer for this when we return to the ship. He turned back to Reeves. Captain, I apologize. This was not sanctioned by this command. It was an unauthorized action by a member of my team. His voice did not shake. His composure was real. But underneath it, Vreth could see it, there was a fury that was being very carefully managed. Reeves studied him. She was reading him the way Cross read rooms, looking for exits, looking for truth. Okay, she said finally. One word. She believed him. Cross, sitting beside her, watched Soral the entire time. He did not say a word. He didn't need to. They took a 30-minute recess. In a side corridor of the shuttle, Zethiel confronted Soral alone. Vreth stood at the door, far enough to give them space, close enough to prevent anything complicated. Why? Zethiel asked. Soral stood very straight. He was older than Zethiel by 2 decades. He had been a diplomat for 40 years. He had negotiated 17 treaties. He had stood in the rooms where Vreth history was made and shaped words that lasted centuries. He had also, Zethiel now realized, always considered humanity a nuisance. Because this is a mistake, Soral said. His voice was controlled, but there was something under it, something old and stubborn, and very sure of itself. You are sitting across from a species that has been spacefaring for less than 300 years. You are treating them as equals. You are letting one ship, one vessel with a frightening weapons list, convince you to rewrite our engagement doctrine. He looked at Zethiel steadily. That tracking device is insurance. When this falls apart, when they use this treaty as a foothold for expansion, we will need to know where that ship goes. Zethiel looked at him for a long time. You've been doing this for 40 years, he said. You have negotiated 17 treaties. Yes. And in 40 years, you never once considered, Zethiel said quietly, that the reason we are sitting in this shuttle right now between our most powerful warship and a human vessel that our scanner cannot fully classify is because for 200 years, people like you decided humanity was beneath consideration? Soral did not answer. They built the Harbinger in 4 years, Zethiel said.
4.
Because we gave them a reason to. Because we destroyed their ships and their stations and their students, and we wrote it in 40-word reports. His voice dropped lower. Soral, Caro, look at where we are. We are the ones who flew into Grid 79 and found a ship we could not scan properly. We are the ones sitting at a table because the alternative was a fight we might not walk away from. He leaned in. This is not weakness. This is the first intelligent thing we have done in 200 years. Soral looked at the floor.
They are young, he said.
One last argument. Old and tired. So is fire, Zethiel said. And nobody debates whether to respect it. When the recess ended and everyone returned to the table, Dr. Mira Okafor spoke for the first time at length. She had been quiet for most of the meeting. She had passed tablets, sent messages, tracked data. She had the kind of presence that professional rooms sometimes contain, the person who is clearly the most informed person in the space, but is content to let other people talk until the moment comes. The moment had come. With your permission, Captain, she said. Reeves nodded. Okafor looked at Zethiel, then at Vreth, who she had correctly identified as the intelligence mind in the room. I want to share something, she said. Not as a threat. As context. She opened her tablet and turned it to face the Vreth side of the table. On it was a map, a detailed, shockingly complete map of Vreth patrol routes, fleet positions, supply chain nodes, and communication relay stations across a region of space 3 times larger than any human vessel had ever officially been recorded entering. Vreth stared at it. He looked at it the way you look at a locked room you have kept secrets in for years, and find the door open and realize it has been open for a long time. How long? He said quietly. 3 years, Okafor said. We have had observation drones in this region for 3 years. Passive. No signals. No weapons. They just watch and record. She paused. We know your patrol schedules. We know your resupply windows. We know which relay stations run on skeleton crew at the end of each rotation cycle. She closed the tablet. I'm showing you this not because we plan to use it. I'm showing you this because I want you to understand that we have been paying attention for a very long time, and that the Harbinger being here today, in this specific grid, at this specific time, was not an accident. The table was very quiet. You knew we would scan you, Seth said slowly. We hoped you would, Okafor said. The scan was the point. We needed you to see what we have. We needed the data to reach your command before any trigger got pulled. She looked at him steadily. A fight today would be very bad for both of us. We calculated the odds. We don't want that. But we needed to make sure you didn't want it either. Seth sat back in his chair. He looked at the map. He looked at the scan data. He looked at Captain Reeves, who had sat through this entire reveal with the same patient, steady expression she had carried into the room. He understood now. The whole shape of it. The Harbinger in Grid 7-9. The full weapons specifications handed across the table. The drones.
The map.
All of it was a message, delivered not with aggression, not with ultimatum, but with cold, precise, almost gentle clarity. We see you. We are ready. And we really would rather not. SYMJHY, Okafor said. She used the phrase deliberately, her pronunciation exact, a small acknowledgement of the human Vreth vocabulary notes her team had compiled. What happens next is a choice. Yours and ours. 3 hours later, back aboard the Eternal Dominion, Seth sent a priority transmission to the Vreth High Council. He had drafted it 4 times. The first draft was diplomatic, careful, cushioned, the kind of language that softened facts until they were safe to hold. He deleted it. The second draft was a straight intelligence report, data forward, emotion stripped, the way Vreth military communication was supposed to sound. He read it back, and it felt like a lie. The third draft started with the words "we were wrong," and immediately felt too simple. The fourth draft he sent as is. It was long. It included the full scan data. It included the map that Okafor had shown them. He had asked for a copy. Reeves had given it to him without hesitation, which was its own kind of statement. It included his account of the 612 names. It included his assessment of Soral's action and his recommendation for formal review. And at the end, in the plain, formal closing structure of a Vreth military communication, he wrote, "We have, for 200 years, made decisions about humanity based on the assumption that they were not yet a consideration. This assumption is no longer valid. The U.S. Harbinger represents a class of vessel we cannot match in current configuration. More significantly, it represents a species that has demonstrated the capacity to escalate technologically in response to threat at a rate that our models did not predict and cannot adequately explain. They have mapped our patrol zones. They have been present in our space for 3 years without detection. They chose to reveal this information at a table rather than from a firing position. I do not believe this reflects weakness. I believe it reflects calculation and confidence. The Vreth High Council is advised that continued dismissal of humanity as a minor species is not merely incorrect. It is dangerous." He sent it. He sat in his command chair and looked at the Harbinger on the main screen. It was still out there, running dark, patient, enormous. His communications officer turned from her station. "Commander, incoming transmission. Encrypted priority. From High Admiral Vreth. The High Admiral. Not a department head. Not a council liaison. The Admiral himself. Response time, 47 minutes. Whoever was watching that transmission log had moved fast. Put it through, Seth said. The Admiral's face appeared on screen. He was old, the oldest senior officer in the Vreth fleet, with skin so pale it was almost white, and a voice that had lost none of its edge in 90 years of military service. He looked at Seth. "You believe all of this," he said. "Not a question." "Yes, sir." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. He looked off-screen at something Seth could not see. Then back. "The scan data is verified?" "Triple verified by 4 independent officers, sir." Another pause. "Soral has served this fleet for 40 years," the Admiral said. Yes, sir. And he placed an unauthorized tracking device on a diplomatic shuttle because he has spent 40 years believing humanity is not worth the respect of honesty. Zethural kept his voice even. I do not doubt his service record. I doubt his current judgment. The admiral looked at him for a long time. What do you want, Commander? Authority to negotiate, Zethural said. Full treaty authority, boundary agreements, non-aggression clauses, joint communication protocol, and a formal acknowledgement in the Vreth public record of the Kepler Belt incident. Silence. A formal acknowledgement, the admiral repeated. 612 names, sir, Zethural said. They have a list. The admiral closed his 4 eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had shifted. You have treaty authority, he said. Don't embarrass us. No, sir. He paused. I intend to do the opposite. The formal treaty negotiation took 11 days. The Harbinger did not leave. It held position in Grid 7-9 like a very patient, very large reminder of exactly why everyone was working hard and sleeping little. Captain Reeves came back to the diplomatic shuttle every day. Zethural was there every day. New people joined the table, lawyers, cartographers, communication specialists, historians. Soral was not among them. He was confined to quarters pending formal review. He did not fight it. Zethural visited him once, briefly, on the 7th day. Soral was sitting at the small desk in his quarters, reading an old Vreth text, philosophical, the kind of thing you turn to when the present is uncomfortable. He looked older than he had at the table. They accepted the boundary proposal, Zethural told him. Grid 7-9 will be a joint corridor. Open passage for both species. Soral nodded slowly. He turned a page in his book. She read you the names, he said. Not a question. Yes. And that changed things. It clarified things, Zethural said. There is a difference. Soral was quiet. I spent 40 years protecting the Vreth from threats. I categorized, I assessed, I managed. He closed the book. I never once read their names. I never asked for them. He looked at Zethural. Is that in your report? To the council? Yes, Zethural said. Not as a condemnation. As a lesson. Soral nodded again. He opened his book again. Zethural left. On the 11th day, the treaty was ready. It was signed in the diplomatic shuttle, the same one where the tracking device had been found. Zethural had chosen the location deliberately. Some rooms needed to finish the story they started. Captain Reeves signed with a pen, an actual physical pen, something Zethural had noticed humans often preferred for significant documents. Ink on paper. Tactile, permanent human. Zethural signed with the Vreth crystal impression seal. They looked at each other across the table. You planned all of this, he said. Not accusatory. Genuine. We hoped for the best version of it, she said. There were other versions. Worse ones. Much worse, she agreed. He leaned forward slightly. The other ships, he said. The ones that are not the Harbinger. She smiled. That same small, patient smile from the first day. Treaties signed, Commander, she said. You don't need to worry about them. That, he said, is not reassuring. I know, she said. It's not supposed to be. Then, and this was the twist nobody in that room had expected, the thing that nobody had seen coming through all 11 days of negotiation and data and history and names. Dr. Okafor opened her tablet one last time. There's one more thing, she said. Reeves looked at her. Even Reeves had not known about this. The slight shift in her posture said so. Okafor turned the tablet around. On it was a medical scan. Vreth biology. The data was clearly labeled with a Vreth medical database header. It had come from their own systems. We detected a biological anomaly in the Vreth patrol zone 6 months ago, Okafor said quietly. We have been tracking it. It is not a weapon. It is not human-caused. She looked at Zethural. It is a pathogen. Airborne. Vreth-specific. We do not fully understand it yet, but our models suggest it is going to reach your nearest inhabited colony in approximately 8 months. The room was very still. We found this, Zethural said slowly, in your patrol data. Yes. You have been watching our space for 3 years. Yes. And you are telling us this now. We are telling you this now, Okafor said, Because the treaty is signed. Because this is what we do when the people around us are in trouble. She looked at him steadily. We stopped sleeping, Commander. We pointed our scientists in the same direction. We have preliminary data on the pathogen structure. She slid the tablet across. We would like to help. Zethiel looked at the tablet. He looked at Captain Reeves. Reeves looked back at him, steady, honest, carrying all the weight of 612 names and 11 days of negotiation and 200 years of history. Caro, she said quietly, this is who we are. 6 months later, the Vreth colony of Velsornd did not fall. The pathogen was contained. The treatment protocol was developed jointly, 6 Vreth biologists and 4 human researchers working in a shared lab on a neutral station that had been established as part of the treaty. The youngest researcher on the human side was 24 years old. She had never heard of the Kepler Belt. She had grown up in a world where Vreth were the alien species in textbooks, not the enemy in the sky. Her name was Jess Carter, and she worked 18-hour days for 3 months and did not complain once. The lead Vreth biologist on the project, a quiet, intense scientist named Thal, told Vethran afterward that he had never seen a human researcher give up on a problem. Not once. Not when the data was bad, not when the models broke, not when 3 consecutive experiments failed. They just try a different door, Thal said, slightly bewildered. Vethran wrote that down. Back on the Eternal Dominion, life had changed in ways that were hard to measure precisely, but impossible to ignore. Junior officers requested the human history files from the ship's database more than any other educational resource. The 612 names list had been transmitted to the Vreth High Council as part of the treaty documentation, and someone, nobody ever officially claimed responsibility, had printed it and posted it on the wall outside the ship's main briefing room. It stayed there. Nobody took it down. So Rahl completed his formal review. His 40 years of service were acknowledged. His judgment in the shuttle was formally recorded as a violation of diplomatic protocol. He was reassigned to an academic post, a policy research division where his experience could be used without being weaponized. He wrote Zethiel a message 3 months later. It was short. It said, I read their history. All of it.
You were right.
We were looking at the wrong data. Zethiel saved the message. He did not reply. He didn't need to. The reply was everything that had happened since Grid 7-9. On Earth, the news of the Velsorn containment was quiet. It was not a headline story. Most people did not know it had happened. The families of the 612, they knew. Some of them had been told privately by Captain Reeves herself, in the months after the treaty, in a long series of personal messages she wrote on her off hours, late at night in her cabin, with a cup of coffee going cold beside her keyboard. She told them their names had been read at a table between 2 species. That the names had done what arguments and weapons alone could not. That they had mattered. Most of the families wrote back. Zethiel sat in his command chair 3 months after the treaty, in the quiet of a routine patrol, looking out at the dark between stars. He thought about the moment Carol had pressed the scan button. For seconds of nothing. Then every alarm on the bridge. He thought about what the Vreth had regretted. Not the scan itself. Not the meeting. Not the treaty. What they regretted. What kept him awake sometimes, in the way that only honest regrets do, was the 200 years before the scan. The 200 years of looking at one small blue planet and deciding nothing there was worth careful attention. The 200 years of 40-word reports and contested zone protocols and minor species, no threat assessment required. They had looked at humanity and seen something small. They had missed everything. Kirill appeared at his station. Commander. Routine patrol check. Nothing to report. Good, Zethiel said. A pause. Sir, Kirill said. There is one thing. Zethiel looked at him. There is a human vessel at the edge of scanner range.
Small.
Civilian class, I think. Running normal commercial transponder. He checked his screen. Should I scan it? Zethiel thought about that for a moment. He thought about Jess Carter's 18-hour days. He thought about the 22-year-old with the missile design. He thought about Thomas Park's mother waiting by the phone. He thought about a pen moving across paper in a diplomatic shuttle that smelled of old decisions being replaced by new ones. Hail them first, he said. Ask them who they are. Ask them where they're going. Kirill blinked. Just ask. Yes, Zethiel said. Just ask. He turned back to the dark between stars. HFY. That is how we do it now. Clapperboard, end of story.